Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Snackable Bakes. In each episode, I hang out with some of the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. My guest today is Elisa Marshall. Elisa is the co-founder and creative director of Maman, the beloved café and bakery known for its French-inspired charm, beautiful interiors, and delicious baked goods. She's also the co-author of Maman, the cookbook, all-day recipes to warm your heart. Elisa, who grew up in Toronto, opened Maman with her husband, Benjamin Surmonte, who's from the south of France. They shared a love of hospitality and opened Maman in Soho in 2014. Since then, it's grown into a much-loved lifestyle brand with over 50 locations across North America. Elisa joins me today to talk about the inspiration behind Maman, which includes her love of all things vintage, as well as her mother and grandmother's recipes. Elisa was a self-described homebody as a kid and spent much of her childhood cooking and baking with her mom, as well as creating beautiful tablescapes for holiday-themed parties, a passion that began when she was just 10 years old. Then she walks me through her s'mores cookie bar recipe from her book. It's a hybrid of 2 of my favorite things, s'mores and cookies. I loved learning about why she uses 2 different kinds of chocolate in her recipe, both wafers and bar chocolate, and why adding a little extra chocolate and marshmallows midway through the bake is the pro move here. I loved chatting with Elisa, so stay tuned. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.substack.com. The new issue of Cherry Bombe magazine is here. The theme is Game Changers, and we have 5 different covers featuring 7 superstars who have changed the game in a major way. This issue celebrates the visionaries, innovators, and changemakers who are reshaping the world of food, drink, and hospitality. If you're a subscriber, you'll receive your issue in the mail soon. Not a subscriber yet? Head to cherrybombe.com, subscribe, and get issues delivered directly to you. You can pick up an issue at one of the great bookstores and culinary shops that carry Cherry Bombe, like McNally Jackson and Kitchen Arts and Letters, right here in New York City. Let's chat with today's guest. Elisa, so excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie.
Excited to be here, finally.
Yay! And to chat some more bars with you and so much more.
Yes.
So you spent your time in the kitchen as a little girl with 2 extraordinary bakers and cooks, your mom or Maman and your grandmother Gracie. And we will talk about them, I promise. But before we do, can you please share like an early childhood baking memory, maybe with one of them or both of them?
With both of them. One of my favorite baking memories was actually with my sister and myself. We would always go over at least 2-3 times a week. We'd go over to my grandmother's house. And every time we would go over, the first thing we would do would be to run into her dining room. And she had a cake stand with a big silver conch on the middle of the table. And there was always something in there that she baked for us. Like she knew she was anticipating us. Usually cookies, to be honest. The first thing we would do, we wouldn't even take off our shoes and get in trouble for it. And we would run into the house and grab the conch and lift it up and see what she made for us. So that is such a fantastic memory that was just kind of ingrained. And then you also just the smell of the house as well. You know, I think that it was just very small and cozy and warm. And you know, the smell of something fresh baked.
Love.
It was her shortbread cookies, or she did this chocolate chip cookie and put like orange rind in it. And always fun, different cookies. And that's what was exciting, was it was like, you know, the kids' surprise boxes now and you don't know what you're going to get. That was my version of it as a child.
And what about an early memory where you were actually baking, like the first time you remember making something?
So definitely with my mom in the kitchen. My mom was an aspiring chef, ended up being a stay-at-home mother, but fulfilled that in many other different ways. We entertained a lot at home. She always had dinner parties over, so I was always her right hand. Cheesecakes was one of her specialties, which is also
the mandarin
in the book, the
orange
orange cheesecake. And that was kind of her go-to. People are coming over, needs a dessert. So that was one of my earliest memories, was kind of, I just remember using the old school beaters and whipping up the cream cheese. And
I also read that you have early memories, or you did this as a little kid, the rolling out of the dough, like if your mother was making
definitely.
a pie.
We were very crafty. I was always onto something. So yeah, lots of pies. My mother was actually of Greek origin. A lot of Greek dishes and phyllo pastry that she used to love. So actually one of my other favorite baking/cooking memories, she made spanakopita, which is still to this day one of my favorite things. And my favorite job was buttering with the brush the layers of the phyllo dough before we put the spinach in between it. So that was like my little painting activity. And it's fun because that's something I get my children to do now, which they also love. So it's fun to see that live on.
I also read, I thought this was interesting and funny and very, I guess, your mom. I love to ask people about like baked goods that they maybe didn't eat at home, like maybe it was at a corner store. And your mother didn't love that. You know, she wanted things to be very fresh and homemade, but there was a carrot cake at a bakery and you guys loved it. And she was like, well, then I'm going to make one even better.
I'm going to make a version of it. Yes. So grew up in Canada in the suburbs of Toronto. So it was from Loblaws, which any Canadian would know, biggest, supermarket chain out there. And it was in a red foil container with a plastic lid. I just have these memories. It was a carrot cake with cream cheese frosting on the top. And that was kind of like our one delight when she didn't feel like cooking, didn't feel like baking, just wanted something easy to satisfy the kids. And then, of course, she was actually into organic food back in like the early 90s. And before it even was a thing, before Whole Foods existed, we would go to these little hole-in-the-wall grocery stores buying, these natural food stores, buying all of these, organic products, which felt so foreign and weird back then. And I remember being in all these natural stores back then as opposed to the normal supermarkets, buying ingredients. So she was very health conscious and still is to this day, but she loved kind of taking more of the, traditional sweets and baked goods and making them healthier.
So you grew up in the Toronto suburbs, surrounded by these two generations of women baking and cooking, your mom and your grandmother. I don't usually ask this question, but it occurred to me that, first of all, I should start asking this in every interview because it's such a good one, but also for you specifically. Describe your childhood kitchen where you spent so much time, because the aesthetics of space are obviously extremely important to you. And, you grew up in a kitchen, that now you kind of replicate in your beautiful cafes.
That's really funny that you mentioned that, because so much of my home, which I'm slowly realizing I have incorporated into my aesthetic and my life today, like my childhood home. So starting with the kitchen, it was, an old 80s kitchen. We had an older home. It must have been from like the 60s. Beautiful, very vintage. I hated it as a child because everything was like old and wood, and my father was an antique dealer. So I'm like, I wanted IKEA furniture like all of my friends. And I had these old farmhouse tables and mismatched chairs. And then I remember our kitchen was like a honey oak, like everything was back in those days. And I remember my mom painted everything white and beautifully molded. Back then it wasn't sleek, modern. So a lot of attention to detail, craftsmanship. I remember the cabinetry. And it had one of those awful vinyl floors, that looks like tiles, but it was just literally a big sticker on the floor. So I do also remember that. But another funny memory you just reminded me of, I was looking through some photos of, my parents' bed where, was the best hangout for my sister and I. You spend all your sick days, you spend all your TV days there. And her sheets were blue and white and were the exact same floral pattern as my cup. And that must have been, I just found pictures. I'm like, I need to do something with these pictures and tell this story. So I'm happy you asked that question, because that must have just been embedded in my subconscious, like sitting there watching like the old Martha Stewart shows and surrounded by this blue and white floral. And
when you say your cup, you mean the paper cup?
Yes, the paper cup, like one of our patterns. So we have 4 signature patterns, but one we created, it was roses and peonies, and we did that in tribute to my mom and my husband's mom, of their 2 favorite flowers. Yeah, it's funny how even the farmhouse table with all the mismatched chairs, that's something that I've brought into the cafes. Yeah. Now I have a very also beautiful, exposed wood beam, white detailed kitchen, very reminiscent of mine. So it does. I think the environment just stays with you.
And it seeps into you, as is obvious from the sheets and the cups. It seeps into you in ways you're unaware of. And so then you want that thing, but you're not sure why.
Exactly.
Or you have it in your head and you're not sure why. Your husband, too, who is your partner with Maman, also spent a lot of time in his childhood kitchen, and he's French, and I'm assuming sort of with the same beautiful warmth and aesthetics.
Absolutely.
I mean,
very
the French
European.
Version.
Yeah, old hospitality. His culture is the importance of food and how, your entire day revolves around your meals. Like even now when we go and visit, it's like you drive 20 minutes to go to the butcher to get your meat, and then you go to the little vegetable farm to grab your vegetables and your fresh produce, and then you go to, a little market to get all of your staples, and you have to go somewhere else for your cheese and go somewhere for your meats. And it's, it's a 3-hour ordeal, whereas the American culture is just one-stop shop, get it all. But there it's so much based on quality ingredients. That really opened my eyes because it's something that wasn't embedded in my world and my culture growing up. It's, really made me appreciate that.
If you love our show, did you know that we publish a free baking newsletter every Saturday to correspond with each new episode? Check out Cherry Bombe Substack to subscribe to our She's My Cherry Pie newsletter today, where you'll get exclusive insights about my guests on the show, their recipes, and other fun baking news and tips. Plus, check out our other free newsletters, where you'll find the latest food and fashion news and browse through our recipe catalog, which is filled with some really great recipes. While you're there, consider becoming a paid Substack subscriber to get access to exclusive content from Cherry Bombe Magazine, invites to our monthly Bomb Squad meetings with industry pros, and discounts to events like our annual Jubilee Conference. A subscription is just $6 per month or $55 a year. Learn more at cherrybomb.substack.com or click the link in our show notes. This is interesting about your mom. She was not only this fantastic cook and baker, but she had actually been interested enough to go to cooking school before you guys were born.
She loved it, and I think she obviously drew so much of that inspiration from her mom. And, Martha Stewart was her idol back then, too. I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, she was the queen. Still is the queen. But I saw my mom kind of, idolizing her and really kind of owning and embracing that lifestyle of being a stay-at-home mom and gardening and cooking and crafting. And so very inspiring.
So you were a homebody, thanks to your doting stay-at-home mom. And I love this. You wrote this somewhere. I'm not sure where I read it, but you were the most unindependent child due to your mom.
Yes.
Just because she was... Tell us about being a homebody and what and how she would treat you like a queen.
Her and I just had such a special... and still do to this day, such an amazing relationship. Once I was in my late teens, I was like, Mom, I have to go away to school. I'm like, I can't stay here. I'm like, I don't know how to make my bed. I don't know how to do my own laundry. I'm like, she taught me all of that stuff, along the way, of course, but I almost needed to be forced out for the independence because she really was my best friend in all of this and my right hand. And we had such a wonderful relationship together and had so much fun together. It was almost not a mother-daughter relationship. Like her and I were more like sisters and best friends growing up, which, I'm so fortunate for. I remember going away to school being like, I need to learn how to do stuff on my own. Stop over-momming me because it's not going to lead me to a successful life.
Your precursor sort of to being an event planner, to building out beautiful cafes, etc., I think is this moment or these moments when you were, I think, as young as 10 and you were really into setting tables, like making the table look really beautiful.
It was my favorite hobby. It would be like theming parties. I remember Thanksgiving, we'd get pumpkins, carve out pumpkins. We had a big, beautiful backyard. I was ironing leaves between wax paper and making placemats for a fall-themed dinner party. So my parents would just always have people over cooking and entertaining, and it was always kind of my job to make it look pretty.
Would you say you were almost more into that than the cooking and baking?
I would, to be honest. Yes, definitely.
No, I get that. You were always into arts and crafts. Fair to say that was like your number one homebody activity.
Completely.
Yeah. I loved that. And were you ever baking and cooking independently or only ever if your mom was in the kitchen?
No, completely independently. And I think when I really kickstarted it and stopped was when I went off to school. I moved to Montreal. I was by myself. And I remember I wasn't big into partying here and there. I feel like I would rather stay home and, tackle a French onion soup recipe and dive deep into that. And had a beautiful kitchen, I remember, in my first apartment. And I had a big chandelier in there. And it was just kind of, dream, very girly place. And I just really enjoyed spending time there and making things and trying things and being creative and testing things out. So that was really my first step to independence.
Yeah. Tell us about your childhood love of Martha. And we will discuss later on in the interview about how that has been manifested in the most incredible way.
Childhood and adulthood. It has not disappeared. It's not just a childhood love. It's grown over the years. I really idolized her because she was just really doing a little bit of everything. And also, that's kind of ultimately how Maman started was, in my early 20s, I just couldn't find that thing that checked all the boxes. I wasn't fulfilled in all of these jobs that I had. And I found myself doing 5 different careers where I really looked at her and she was seemed to me like she was just living her dream life. And she just was able to build a career for herself that really combines so many of her passions and what she loved to do. And I think I was very inspired by that.
Tell us about pretending to be sick so you could watch her TV shows.
all the time. And that goes back to lying in my mom's blue and white floral bed watching Martha Stewart episodes. Yeah, especially I'd say early high school. I'm like, ow, Mom, my stomach hurts today. I can't go to school. And she was the worst at this. She'd be like, okay, perfect. Come stay home with me. Do you want a note? And then there would be times that she's like, if you have a sore throat or I cough once, she's like, you should just stay home with me today. I'm like, no, Mom, I have an exam. I need to pass high school. I need to go to school. So it was the opposite. She was trying to keep me home so we could play all day together. Right. And I just have such great memories. Just I would love to watch what she did and then just go play and try and recreate it.
I think it was around this time, or maybe all through your childhood, you would like to decorate cakes in addition to baking and cooking and setting the table. And you were plating things beautifully on platters. And this is all such Martha behavior. It's so clear that even as a young person, that inspiration, you were already channeling her.
Yeah. No, definitely. I know. It's crazy to look back on and put all those pieces together and think about it like that.
I love that. When you went to college, you stayed home in Toronto, then you went to Montreal, studied fashion design, but moved over to PR, marketing and branding, which you loved, got into the event side of fashion and event planning for weddings. And I loved this. So you were event planning for weddings, and everyone wanted these cupcake and sweet tables, which I can these
candy bars.
100%.
That was the hot thing back then. So
you started your own little business doing that so that you could not only plan the event, but also be the person in charge of that. When you first did that, it was actually a project related to your event planning degree that you were getting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
So, when I was in my early 20s, moved to Montreal, as you mentioned, and I had my 9-to-5 in fashion PR, which was amazing job. It was paying the bills, but it just wasn't fulfilling my creativity and everything I wanted to do. So at that point, I wanted to get my hands dirty in a bunch of different things. And so I started interning with a wedding planner. Fell in love with that. I started doing some interior design projects on the side because people came and saw how beautifully I decorated my house. My father, as I mentioned, was an antique dealer, and he was an entrepreneur as well and really instilled that in us in a young age. So it was something that was always embedded in me. It was you need to create a world for yourself. I was event planning, got heavy into that. I had my 9-to-5. I was doing interior design, and then I was always baking. And it started off with employee birthday parties. I was at Freemark Brands, and it started off with one of the coworkers. It was her daughter's 10th birthday party, and loved I don't remember what it was, but unicorns. And I would always make cupcakes and bring them into the office because I would just bake at home and I needed someone to share them with and someone to eat them because I couldn't do it all. So I'd bring it into the office. And that's really what kind of kickstarted my business. So I started this little business hustling in the office, making cupcakes for everyone's kids' birthday parties. And then with one of my best friends, it turned into much more and kind of expanded our networks. We started doing a variety of birthday parties and just through word of mouth had this little custom cupcake company.
Eventually, you met your Maman partner and future husband, and you guys worked in hospitality together. That was, you were sort of already dipping into it, but you guys sort of went full steam ahead. And then you opened Maman in Soho in New York City in 2014. I read that Maman was inspired by your childhood memories, your dishes, and cookies.
So cookies actually definitely an inspiration, but never what we thought was going to be the thing that puts us on the map. And I think ultimately so much of it was really like the concept and kind of creating that space. So I was so heavily in the event world, loved baking, loved branding, marketing, arts and crafts, design, florals, a little bit of everything. And I just needed to create this world for myself where I could do everything that I loved because it didn't exist. And also what didn't exist was, a warm and welcoming place in New York. And I felt like New York wasn't home for so many people. This was 2014. The cafe scene was very cold. It was very industrial chic back then. And, most people don't have kitchens in New York, let alone dining rooms to entertain. And entertaining was such a huge part of me, especially coming from, a background of wedding planning. I personally couldn't find that space where I could, have a baby shower, bridal shower, birthday party for a group of 8 to 10 friends. And so it was a void that I saw that I created. And I must say, Maman is, selfishly created for me. And I'm glad everyone else enjoys it so much because it was just really kind of finding that missing piece and creating that world for myself.
When you were brainstorming recipes, you realized that everything led back to home, either to yours or to your husband's. Was that intentional or did that just sort of happen as the development began?
No, so we always had the concept for it. And I think when we were brainstorming what items were going to be on the menu, originally we had a chef come on board who was looking after the savory. I was doing most of the baking. My husband was doing, a lot of the operational side of things and cooking as well. When we were talking about what dishes we wanted on the menu, we kept saying, my grandma has this cookie and my mom had this egg salad and, his mom had this amazing croque maman that she used to make and we kept referring to our moms in our conversation. And we knew we wanted to kind of create that homey environment. We wanted it to feel like a home away from home. And so when we were coming up with the name, that was the one thing that clicked. And we're like, that's it. We're like, Mom. And I think it's, it's interesting actually what I have realized is me growing up, Canadian, speaking both French and English, so many Americans don't know what it means and that it means mother in French. Mm-hmm. So it's part of our education process now because I just always assumed everyone knew that.
Tell us about the nutty chocolate chip cookie that really, I think, ended up putting Maman on the map.
It really did. Yeah.
Tell us.
We were very fortunate. So that was the recipe of our chef at the time when we first opened. It was his aunt's cookie recipe. Our nutty chocolate chip, it's a classic chocolate chip cookie, but it has macadamia nuts, almonds, walnuts, sea salt, really standout cookie. And we were very fortunate. I guess it was our second week of being open. We had people just piling in the door, and we had no idea why. And it was started to form a lineup at the door, and everyone was ordering this cookie. And I was, working the barista and jumping to the cash, and Ben was behind the counter putting cookies constantly in bags. And eventually, of course, we sold out very quickly. And a man came in, and he was like, I drove an hour to come here and try these cookies. What do you mean you're sold out? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, how did you even hear about these cookies? Yeah. Like, I was so oblivious. And he goes, I read the article in Grub Street. And then I think New York Times picked it up, and it just became this thing that we didn't know about.
Had Grub Street just somebody had
Grub Street,
stopped
it was
by?
Ciara from Grub Street, who we owe so much to. It was so fabulous. And she wrote an article and just stopped by and said, Mama has got the best chocolate chip cookie in the city. And so that was the one thing that really kind of kickstarted us. And so we're like, I guess we're going to start making some more cookies. And we're going to be here all night making cookie dough. And it really helped to gain some popularity for us.
And then in 2017, Oprah said it was one of her favorite things.
So
good.
So that also, helped to blow it up. It's still one of my favorite things, too.
Yeah, yum. In 2025, you opened your 50th location of Maman, which is
my one little baby.
Amazing. And now you're actually up to 59.
59 last week.
Tell us everything. And also, I know you get asked this all the time, but it is interesting. Like, how do you do that and yet stay true to yourself, quality control when it's that? Like, I was even imagining just with my, addled brain, how do you even remember all 59?
I don't. I'm so embarrassed because sometimes people are like, oh, where's your location? Like, up around. I'm like, I get my phone and go. I'm like, I can't.
You need to Google it.
I'm like, I actually, admittedly, don't. The secret, it's not really a secret, but it's just, building a great team around you. Yeah. We are so fortunate. We have got, we call them our Maman family. We've just got the great group of supportive, incredible family members, which are employees around us who really see the vision, who have the passion, who have the drive. Many have been with us since very, very early on. My first interview before the company even existed, I'm like selling a concept on a piece of paper, is still with us today. It goes so much on how you treat people. I think Ben and I are also very hard workers. We don't sit on a high horse and expect to be served. And, we'll be the first to bus a table when we come into any of the restaurants and, hop in and wash dishes if need be. So I think a lot of leading by example. And we genuinely enjoy it too.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You guys must just pinch yourselves like, what?
Sometimes, I'm like, sometimes you want to burn them all down, and sometimes you just like pinch yourself and you're like, this is really amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's quite awesome.
And I know that you had this chef, and maybe you have periodically over the years who came up with that nutty cookie. But I understand you and your mom were also testing the recipes for the bakery before you opened. And
absolutely.
You were very much...
Early on, it was me.
It was you.
Ben and I in the kitchen.
And he did the savory, right?
He did the savory, I did the sweets, and then he would work the cash and I would work the barista.
Yeah.
And it was really just such a passion project. So it's funny, as we've grown, the middle part, it's been 12 years almost. Yeah. So the beginning was very hands-on, very intense, really heavily in the business. And then it was, working on the business and putting out fires. And, it was scaling exponentially, very quickly, managing people. And we kind of removed ourselves from the business. But now what's really nice is we've built up such a great team. Our job descriptions for both of us have really kind of evolved into what we love. And I had to realize that a few years ago that, I have to get back in the kitchen. I have to get back baking. And I want to be the one who's tying the bows on these cookies because that's why I started this. And so I almost sometimes have to force myself to do those things that I shouldn't be, necessarily doing as, the owner and the CMO of the company. But it's the stuff that just fuels me and brings me joy. So we're at a great position right now where I love teaching baking workshops. We have tons of classes in Miami, where I can actually get my hands dirty and spark the passion and the reminder of why I did this to begin with and what I love doing. And I think that that's also what keeps me grounded and what keeps me really genuinely enjoying this. And so many people are like, you're going to sell, or when's the exit? I'm like, I actually love it. I'm like, it's like my firstborn. It's my baby. Like, I'm just having so much fun now at this point doing what I do every day that it really brings me joy, like it did when we first opened.
Tell us about the Maman Cookbook, which came out in the fall of 2021. I know that two things I think you loved the most, the photo shoot, of course,
so fun.
and also the fact that you developed during COVID.
We had a few people poaching us for a book early on pre-COVID, and, we were in the thick of it. I did not have time to reply to my emails, let alone think about writing a book. I had my first son, Eve, right before lockdown in March. And when COVID hit hard that March, the world shut down, our restaurants shut down. I just had a new baby. I had my husband and I were literally stuck at home. And then it really allowed us to work on passion projects and stuff that would have never existed. And the book would have never come to life because I would have never been able to take in the time to do it and recipe test and have fun with it. So, that is my COVID baby, is that cookbook. And we spent so much time in the kitchen just playing and scaling down recipes. That was the most challenging because when you are, working with our Maman recipe for 36 dozen cookies, it's not math when you have to turn that into an at-home recipe for 12 cookies. We just kept recipe testing, coming up with different things and trying other people's recipes and getting inspired by cooking like so many people did.
A lot of people will gatekeep a famous recipe that they have. Did you ever think about not putting the nutty chocolate chip cookie in the book?
We did.
Tell me everything.
We really did. I think so much of it comes down to ingredients and quality of ingredients. And even ourselves, I'm not buying the same chocolate at a retail standpoint than I am at a wholesale standpoint and importing. And the butters that we use are different. And so, I think also so much of what we do is experience-based, and everybody wanted this recipe. So we gave in with our specific nutty chocolate chip cookie recipe. Some of the other ones are modified because they just, don't make sense to be making them at home when it is really meant to be such a commercial recipe. So we did have to really modify some of the ingredients and some of the other ones. But our chocolate chip cookie recipe is relatively true to exactly what we have in the cafe. But it never tastes the same. And I think so much about it as the experience. I'm like, I don't want people to not come in because they're just going to make this cookie at home. You're coming in for other reasons. Yeah. It's not just for the food when you come to Maman.
Please tell us about your collab with Martha, because it is such a full circle
it really is.
Moment. I think it was now a year ago.
It was a year ago.
Tell us about it.
Actually, it was probably about a year and a half ago because it took about 6 months for the partnership to kind of come to fruition. I planted the seed. Even if you look back at some of my other earlier interviews, it's who's your dream collab? Who's your number one dinner guest who you would have? And
Desert
it was just
Island.
always Martha Stewart. She would probably come up in every podcast, every previous interview that I had. And so it was a lot of manifesting that brought it to life. Definitely putting it out there. And networking too, meeting different people. And my PR team, I'm like, guys, I need to do something. I'm like, this is, if you could do one thing for me, this is all that I want.
Yeah.
Word of mouth got out there, and we, got an email that said the subject heading was Martha Stewart ex Maman, and my stomach just dropped to the ground. And
I have goosebumps.
I know.
Oh,
and it was just, it was in October of
24.
24. Yeah. From then it was, back and forth. Her team is so fabulous. And what we kind of landed on was coming up with this capsule menu collection that really kind of brought to life some of her recipes. And I think, what so many of us don't realize is this woman's got some of the best recipes that anyone has ever tried and tasted and made. And there's no opportunity to taste them. I mean, she does have her, her 2 restaurants now in Vegas and Connecticut, but it's not, her cookie cookbook. I think so many people wanted to bring that to life from her team and her fans as well, wanted to kind of turn that into something that was a little bit more tangible. So it was a great opportunity. I think the brands just naturally collab so well with one another. So we kind of came up with a capsule collection. So it's 5 items. Originally, we signed on for a year. We just renewed for another year because it's going so well. 5 items within our menu. We're doing beverage, we're doing a sandwich, we're doing a cookie, a sweet item, and then a savory item. It's kind of how we've mapped it out. And many of them are from her book, classic recipes that she had that, we of course had to tweak to make it conducive for, food service industry. And then we've had a lot of fun kind of playing on fusions of some of her dishes and some of our dishes.
What's the cookie and the sweet pastry that's on the menu right now that's Martha?
So right now we're doing a delicious classic chocolate chip cookie. So it was kind of inspired by her cookie recipe with a creamy caramel center. And it was on the cover of one of her books, one of her cookie books back in the day as well. So that one and her kitchen sink cookie, which we just retired, which I'm getting a lot of hate mail about because everyone just kind of was so in love with that one. But those are 2 classics and 2 standout recipes. So it's been really great to be creative and to work with her team and bring some of her classics to life for people to enjoy.
Are there pastries too? I thought
pastries
I saw something,
too. Yes.
was
cherries?
So
we did a cherry cheesecake turnover. That one just launched.
Gosh.
We just did a creme brulee sugar bun as well, which was one of my favorites. So it's a sugar, ultimately it's a croissant roll that's stuffed with a creme brulee filling, and
almost
we
like
brulee
a cardamom bun, but,
exactly.
But
we brulee it on site to get that nice kind of flaky, custardy, crispy. It's fantastic.
Love.
So, very delicious.
And then I promise we're going to talk about some more bars, but before we do, tell us about Ma Petite Choux, your clothing line.
Yes. So as we've discussed my childhood and my love for doing tons of different things, I see that through Maman as well. And once I had my second son, Rev, I just, I always grew Maman to be more than just a brick and mortar 4-wall F&B. And I knew that the brand was going to have more legs because I purposely didn't ever want to stifle my creativity. We started with a bib. We started with a collaboration bib with Lalo, which did exceptionally, exceptionally well. People just always, wanted to grab a piece of the Maman brand and the lifestyle and bring it home. And when I had my second son, I love blue and white and toile and vintage patterns. And I just couldn't find anything that really kind of embodied that look and that vibe and that aesthetic that I wanted. And one of my good friends was working in production in baby wear, and it was just an easy decision. And I had a friend of mine create this beautiful storytime toile. So it was a, very fun, whimsical, childish take on our traditional Maman toile that we have. And I just did a very small capsule collection. And also it was my realization that our customer is moms. It's me. We're women who are having babies and love beautiful things. And, the French aesthetic, our place was just always a sea of strollers. So I kind of tapped into that. We sell it online. In some stores, we have it on display in retail as well, but it's available through our Maman website.
All right, now we're going to talk about the s'more bars. Okay. So first, tell us about them. This is like a hybrid situation.
Oh, I'll have to tell you how this came to be.
Yes.
It was because my editor cut me off with cookies in the book. And she said, you can't do any more cookies. There's too many cookies, because they wanted to make sure it was a baking book. It wasn't a cookie book. It was evenly distributed. But we had so many amazing recipes. I'm like, how could I only select 4 cookies to have in this book? So we had to get creative, and I'm like, what if we turn one of our cookies into a bar? And it was a fantastic idea and fun to learn that you can do that baking at home. So many of the recipes, like traditional cookie recipes, are conducive to being baked in a bar format. I think it's just, a fun take on the traditional cookie. I personally love it because I just have it sitting on my kitchen counter. You can just cut off a little slice whenever you need. You're not given a huge cookie, which you feel entitled to finish. The s'mores cookie was one of our top sellers. It came out maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. We launched it in summertime, and we just ran out of room for cookies in the book. So we decided to, repurpose it into bar format.
Love. But studded with these gooey, chewy marshmallows and crisp graham crackers and a double hit of chocolate. I love everything about it. Do you ever put the bar on the menu?
We haven't yet.
Yeah.
No.
But you still have the cookie.
We still have the cookie, yes. But our cookies are seasonal, so they're constantly changing. We don't have it right now.
Yeah.
We're doing actually a s'mores croissant cube. So that was kind of our ode to s'mores for the summertime. But we always have a rotating menu.
Yeah. All right. So first things first, we're going to place the rack in our oven in the center, and we're going to heat the oven to 350 degrees. We're going to line a 9 by 13-inch baking pan with parchment paper, leaving a little 1-inch hang over the long sides, sort of to make a sling. I usually will spray or butter beneath the paper. Do you not do that? Just the paper sort of holds everything in place?
I find the paper has been sufficient. Yeah. And I also should mention, when translating any of your classic cookie recipes into a bar, what I found is you need to increase the cooking time and you want to lower the temperature. So usually if it were to be the cookies, they would be at 375, but we dropped it down to 350 because you want to kind of cook lower and slower because it's a much thicker texture.
Yeah. I'm working on a cookie book right now, and that was one of my aha moments when I was developing recipes, that cookies should be baked at 375. I feel like not everyone...
That's true. 350 is kind
People
of like
think
the
that
go-to.
It's 350. I thought it was really interesting.
We typically do 375, but definitely when converting to the bar, you want to drop it about 25 degrees.
So in a medium bowl, and do you have a favorite when you're at home? Do you like to bake with ceramic or glass? What's your favorite mixing bowl?
Vintage bowls.
Yeah.
I have some beautiful etched glass. I'm a huge fan of estate sales and garage sales, and I just love pretty things. And I think it makes baking so much more fun when you have, these beautiful vintage pieces. So I have maybe 30 bowls that I make.
So in your medium vintage bowl, you're going to whisk together some all-purpose flour. And do you have a favorite brand, either at the bakery or at home?
King Arthur?
Yes. King Arthur, we love. Add some King Arthur flour, some fine sea salt. Do you ever use kosher, either at home or in the bakery?
Not as often at home. My favorite sea salt that I use is the salt de Ibiza.
Yeah.
Salt de Ibiza, it's like the fleur de sal there. Yeah. We actually lived in Ibiza for many years and lived actually in the Salina. So it has a little bit of nostalgia. It's just a fantastic, fantastic quality.
We're going to add some baking powder, and I thought this was interesting, which I can relate to when I think of my own blondie recipe and brownie recipes. There's only a teeny tiny amount of baking powder because you don't want it to be cakey.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but it helps give a tiny bit of lightness.
Yep.
Then we're going to add 1/2-inch pieces of graham cracker and stir all of that dry ingredients to incorporate. Then in our stand mixer with our paddle attachment, we'll combine some unsalted room temp butter, some granulated sugar, some brown sugar. It's equal amounts of both. Is that sort of like a nod to a chocolate chip cookie?
It is.
Yeah.
It's really a nod to our classic chocolate chip cookie. I think, you get the kind of gooiness and the caramel essence from using the brown sugar, but then it tends to crisp up a little bit nicer using the white sugar.
Totally.
So, yeah, we love doing a combination of the two in most of our recipes.
Then we're going to add some vanilla. Do you have a favorite brand? Either at
scraping the beans.
Yeah.
That's really my personal preference.
Yeah.
I think, some of the extracts can be so fake tasting. Yeah. They smell like perfumes. So I think really, a good vanilla bean paste or scraping the beans themselves makes all the difference.
And we're going to beat on medium, scraping down the sides of the bowl as needed for about 3 minutes to fully combine. I wondered if you've ever tried either to make chocolate chip cookies or blondies with melted butter. Because I do it with melted butter, like then you can sort of one bowl the whole situation.
Yes,
and then you do get the density of, as opposed to the lift from creamed butter.
And how does it throw off the texture in the end? And that is it.
I feel like it's pretty great.
Really?
I mean, it maybe leans a little
how
gooier.
Different? Gooier. That's my thought.
But not that a blondie with cream butter is cakey, but even probably less so because there's no air that went into the batter at all. That went into the dough.
Yeah, that's a good point. Try that next time.
Yeah, it's fun.
Good tip.
Yeah. So then with the mixer running on low, we're going to add eggs. And I wondered, I'm sort of on the fence about this, but are you like a very room temperature ingredient person? Like, will you?
I am.
Will you use,
usually I guess just from restaurant, you have your mise en place, put everything out, leave it out. I'm not neurotic about it. I'll still, sometimes you want to bake, you got to get it done. And I don't have time for that. So you use them cold.
Yep.
I don't see a huge difference, to be honest, in the outcome.
With the mixture running, we're going to add some eggs one at a time, scraping down the sides of the bowl after each addition, beating until fully incorporated, about 2 minutes. Then we'll add the flour mixture on low, just until no flour is visible, about 1 minute. I feel like that's so, you were talking before with the cookie about how it's always going to taste different than the way it's baked at the cafes because of the experience the bakers have. Like, that's a perfect example of a place where home bakers don't, depending on their sophistication. I mean, obviously, the She's My Cherry Pie listeners are incredibly sophisticated. But there is that thing when you're writing a recipe about really trying to help people not go too far.
Too far, of course.
We're going to add the dark chocolate baking wafers. I think your favorite is Guittard.
In the restaurant, we use Republic de Cacao, which we love. But for an at-home, I love a Guittard. And for this recipe here specifically, because it's so sweet with the marshmallows, I like to use a little bit more of a bitter sweet, like going up to like a 70% chocolate. I find, especially when you have cookies with other things in it that add to the sweetness, it's nice to kind of counterbalance it a little bit by doing a bit of a richer chocolate.
I think that's really smart. I think you even write in the head note to this that it's dark chocolate.
Yes.
Like you kind of pop that, which
because
I
otherwise it's just going to, if you were to use a milk chocolate, it's just going to be so sweet adding in the marshmallows and the graham crackers.
It's
so
hard because when I think s'mores, I think Hershey's milk chocolate, and you want as the recipe developer to like give homage to that. But I agree with you;
we give homage to that in the name and in the theme. I'm like, but taste wise,
I think you're right.
It makes for a better quality, and the wafers as well over the chocolate bars or the chips, just because it has a better melting point. So I feel like then in the bar especially, you get that like ooiness and the gooiness that you want from the s'mores.
Why wafers?
Yes,
melt for melting pools.
Exactly.
Yeah, because those are so beautiful
for sure.
Yeah. And then we'll add the mini marshmallows. And then we're going to fold all this with a wooden spoon off of the stand mixer so we don't overmix, about 30 seconds. Then we'll transfer the mixture to the prepared pan using sprayed or floured hands. I thought this was a great tip because we're going to press with our hands. Did you just realize when you were developing it that the best way to get that dough to be in the pan was going to be your hands and not like a flexible spatula or something?
One of my chefs, actually. It was like always gloves, but we don't have gloves at home. Yeah. But it was just amazing and something that like I learned so much just like watching.
I'm sure.
10 times more talented than I ever will be pastry chefs in our kitchens right now. And so it's such a great baking school 101 just to be in there and watching them and see how much they do with their hands, wearing gloves, of course, but we don't have that at home.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's brilliant. And I think when I write cookbooks in a kind of a jokey way, but kind of serious under like the tools section, I'm like, your hands. Your hands.
Yeah.
Because people
for sure.
don't realize. Like I separate eggs with my hand. I do everything with my hands.
For sure.
We use our hands to sort of press the dough down. I'm assuming it's very thick.
Yes.
Hence our hands. And then we'll bake until the sides or edges start to brown, but the center's still soft, about 20 to 25 minutes. And I love this. We're not done baking at 20 to 25 minutes, but we're going to sprinkle chopped dark chocolate and the remaining marshmallows on top. Which, okay, so I thought this was so smart. Is that also what you do with the cookie?
We add some extra marshmallows on the top as well and then put it back in the oven because, firstly, part of it's so much aesthetic. You want to see these golden brown, perfectly roasted marshmallows. And if they're cooking in a 350 oven, they're just going to turn into piles of mush.
Yeah.
So I think aesthetically, it looks beautiful on top. And then it helps to kind of like add that texture. That's not over-baked and it doesn't melt completely within. Yeah. It just kind of sits on the top. And same with the chocolate. Yeah. Having that variety of texture in the bar.
With the chopped chocolate, are we just taking our wafers and chopping them, or are we having a chocolate bar?
So you could do either. For this, I like putting wafers within, so it has that like meltiness, and then I like chopping the chocolate bar and putting it on top because then you get the texture. So then you get the nice combination of the crunch, you get the gooiness of the marshmallows, whereas in the inside, the chocolate is melty. So it just kind of, plays on texture.
I think that's such a smart bakery trick in the sense that I feel like not all recipes would encourage you to do that, but I've made my own versions of some more bars or some more cookies, and it really is a problem because to develop recipes that are super unfussy, I don't like extra steps, but you really want to add later on in the baking time so they toast a little bit, as you said, as opposed to like melting completely. So that's about 8 to 10 minutes once we add the extra marshmallows and the chopped chocolate. Then we'll pull the bars from the oven, transfer to a wire rack, let cool for about 5 minutes, and then we'll lift the bars out from with the parchment handles and place on a cooling rack for about an hour until they come to room temp. Although, can we eat them warm,
I was just going to say, I'm like, that's the cookbook version of it. I'm like, the real version of it is it stays in that baking pan in my kitchen.
You might even start with a spoon.
Yeah, you start by slicing it off when it's super hot, and then it just lives in that pan.
Yeah.
It cools in that pan. It lives in there. Not very long.
Yep.
But I'm like, that's just the proper technique, not the real technique.
Love. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Elisa. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, thank you.
That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.substack.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!